The resume summary is one of the first things a manager looks at when looking at your resume. It's your opportunity to display your personality and stand out from the crowd. And in this video, I'm going to cover the general structure for a resume as well as provide some examples. Let's get to it. Hey, this is Michael with Michael's Business English. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael Rincon. I'm a former six-figure data analyst and ESL instructor and career coach. If you're new here, we talk about business English, communications, and career development. So if you're into that, make sure you like and subscribe. And all the links that we mentioned in this video, you'll find in the description box below. Hey, this is Michael. Just a quick FYI, this video turned out to be quite long, so I decided to break it down into two separate videos. This video is going to be part one. This is going to be the section where I actually break down the structure and the key elements of a resume and the resume summary. I also talk about some examples from my resume, so if you're just looking for quick bullets and summaries, I would recommend until I make part two, which will come out a few days later. It's already been filmed. I just need to make some edits and stuff, so just FYI. Otherwise, I'll see you. Let's get to it. So in good form, I should talk about, does it matter if it's a resume or a CV? And the reality is that no, it won't. It's always going to be nuanced. It's going to depend on the country you're in. It's going to depend on the jobs you're applying for. But typically speaking, it doesn't matter if it's a resume or a CV. And this can also be applied to your LinkedIn profile while we're at it. But you might hear this under different names. So it used to be called career objective. Sometimes it's called about. It's called about in the LinkedIn profile for sure. I think nowadays a lot of people like to call it a professional summary. But if you have to choose between one or the other, here's a quick distinction. The career objective is a bit outdated, and what I mean by that is a career objective is basically like one sentence saying that this is my goal for my career. It's all about me. Now, people are saying it's obsolete compared to professional summaries because employers don't want to hear about you. They want to know what you can do for them. That's where professional summary kind of shines. The summary is kind of a story about who you are. It's kind of like the question, tell me about yourself, but in written form. And it's written in a way, if you do it correctly, that will talk about who you are as how it relates to the role. And that's the main thing of this. The main goal of the resume, the summary, is to talk about yourself in a way that will get employers to realize, oh, this is exactly the person I want to talk to. Now, as a quick caveat, sometimes people kind of ignore this altogether and go straight to the experience to look for the keywords. So just keep that in mind. But once the summary is written, you have it done, like you don't have to worry about it ever again. So it's worth getting this taken care of, worth getting this handled the right way now, so you don't have to worry about this for future references. Once it's written down, you don't really need to adjust it. Unlike the other parts of the resume, like the experience, which you probably need to adjust for each job, the summary is more or less going to be consistent from job to job. So the general structure of your summary is it's basically 3 to 5 sentences. The first sentence should be a high-level overview of who you are. The second part of it should be talking about who you do it for. And the third and final sections should be any specific achievements or relative achievements that are useful for an employer. And a fourth optional section I recommend, depending on the jobs you're applying for, is to list out the type of work or role you're looking for. I'll go more into that as we break it down from section to section. So the other thing we should talk about before we begin is the first person versus third person communication and how you're going to talk on your resume. What's the resume speak? So typically, the standard practice that I've seen is first person implied, which means you're talking about yourself in the first person, but you're not including personal pronouns. You don't say I, me, my. Instead, you'll typically start out with an adjective like developed or improved or created. More on that in more of the achievement section, and you'll see more examples as we go along with this video, but that's the general rule. Some people will suggest other things, so especially for LinkedIn, they might suggest using more like first person saying, I do this, I've done that. That's up to you. For LinkedIn, you can do things a little differently, but I have found success by copying my resume over to my LinkedIn and literally word for word. That's been most effective for me. So that's something you'll want to play with and experiment with as you're doing this stuff. So for your actual headline itself, I've actually talked about this in other videos. Talked about the resume basics video, where I talk about how to keep your headline fairly simple, but generally speaking, your headline will be a summary of your summary. So I'm going to do that one last. So let me start by talking about the first section, which is the first sentence of the summary of who you are. And the best way to describe this is that you want to talk about an adjective as well as a job title, or adjectives about you, if you have multiple adjectives, that talk about you as your character. So my example that I use for me is that I say I'm a highly motivated, assertive, and results-driven professional. Now, if you've gone through some of my other videos, like the resume basics, we've gone through achievements for freshers, you may have noticed I talked about things like personality traits and the strength finders test. That is how I got these keywords in there. That's how I found my adjectives. So if you're looking for help on like how to improve like your summary of who you are, I would suggest going through personality tests to kind of identify what adjectives best describe you. And then I would also just think about like what other things people have said about you. What have people said about you at work? What kind of things have you gotten in your performance reviews, if you have any? If you don't have performance reviews, I would stick with the personality test. Finally, if you don't want to do any of that, I would also suggest looking at the job descriptions as well. What are they looking for? So if a job says they're looking for someone who's initiative, someone who takes a self-starter, that would be the adjective I use. I would say I'm a self-starting, assertive, and results-driven professional. I would say I'd also try to be more specific with the first sentence if possible. I left it as professional because I was trying to go for more jobs. And when I started, I haven't bothered to update it, to be really honest, because the experienced analyst headline does most of the work for me. But I would say I would put the title in there instead of saying professional. I'd say experienced, results-driven, self-starting, whatever terms you want to use, and then like graphic designer, operations specialist, teacher, web developer, whatever that is for you. So the second sentence on your resume summary, your CV summary, should talk about who you do it for, what kind of work you do. So the first sentence, you talk about your adjectives, you talk about who you are, the things you've done, talk about what kind of work you do. Now you talk about who you're doing it for. So for me, I talked about financial services companies. So because I have almost 10 years experience as a data analyst, I've talked about the actual names of the companies I've worked for. These are kind of Fortune 500 companies. So it made sense for me to do it. Some of them were mortgage servicing, so it's a completely different industry. So I'm trying to show versatility in my industry. So you'll want to do that as well. You'll want to talk about the industries you serve if you can do that. Now for the third section of your summary, I want to talk about the achievements that you've accomplished. So anything that's relative to the jobs you're applying for, this is a good opportunity to like sprinkle the keywords in there from the job posting. So for example, for me, what I like to use is track record includes demonstrated acumen in data operations and problem solving with a focus on process improvement that enhances metadata tools, third-party vendor management, compliance, internal, external customers, and investor experience. Now, I put a lot of words in there. It's a pretty big sentence, but the reason I did that was because those are the keywords that kept coming up in my job search. These are the keywords that kept coming up in metadata roles. These are the keywords that kept coming up in analyst positions in my field of financial services. So when you're putting out your key achievements, make sure they are relative to the role you are looking for. Make sure the achievements are useful for the jobs you're applying for. Now, the final section of your summary, this is what I suggest, is kind of an optional thing, but I recommend you notate the roles you're looking for. This is more important if you're in the consulting industry, for example, in data analyst world. A lot of the jobs are a combination of full-time jobs. Some of them are part-time jobs. Some of them are contract jobs. I think it's in your best interest in that industry specifically to notate if you're looking for full-time work or you're looking for part-time work. It's important to put that clarity out there because sometimes employers don't know, and that having that clarity will save you time. Because sometimes recruiters reach out to you saying like they have a contract job available. You'll minimize the chances. You won't completely stop it from happening, but you'll minimize the chances of you spending your time, wasting time with employers who have no interest in like hiring a full-time employee. Right? Now, recruiters tend to be kind of like messy with this, but hiring managers tend to be very finicky. They're like, I had an example a while back where I was a full-time employee and I got approached for a contract to hire role, and I was told by the recruiter it was going to be contract to hire. When I got to the interview, the hiring manager saw my resume and he saw that I was looking for full-time work, He told me that he wasn't sure this contract was going to convert full time. So I think it's valuable to put that distinction in there, let them know what you're looking for, so you're not wasting time. You don't accept the job offer. You don't spend time on a job that's never going to become what you want it to be.